A mother, her daughter, and their dog stopped on a cold afternoon for looking out of place. They didn't know she was a war veteran, or that the dog's harness carried a hidden camera. What started as harassment would crack open. Web of corruption from the streets of Millstone to City Hall. If you believe the truth should never be buried, stay with us and subscribe so you don't miss the ending. The February wind swept through the narrow streets of Millstone, a town tucked between barren hills and long-abandoned cornfields. Dawn hadn't fully arrived yet, but the pale street lamps were already winking out, surrendering to the cold light of morning. Millstone felt like two worlds stitched together with a loose, fraying seam. To the east lay the new subdivision white-painted. Houses in neat rows, lawns trimmed like carpets, driveways filled with shiny pickups and SUVs. To the west sprawled the old town brick facades, chipped and faded, rust-streaked tin roofs, windows boarded up with plywood long ago. Only a two-lane road separated them. Yet every morning, people passed each other as if that line were invisible, and utterly impassable. Ariel Daniels was crossing that line now, leading Rex, an aging German shepherd, from the west side toward the public library on the east. Her khaki coat was worn thin at the shoulders, the color dulled to a tired brown-gray. She kept her head down, curls spilling forward to hide most of her face, her hand gripping Rex's leash like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. Rex walked slow but steady, tail giving a faint wag whenever he looked up at her. Gray had crept into the fur around his muzzle, but his eyes still held that sharp, alert glint, proud, watchful. Few knew his past, except Ariel and her mother, Naomi Daniels, a veteran who had served overseas. A long scar along his left hind leg and the faint limp in cold weather were all that remained of his military service. As they cut through downtown, the air thickened with the smell of butter and cinnamon from Mrs. Joe's bakery. A group of middle-aged women sat by the window, cappuccinos steaming in front of them, their eyes following Ariel like a scene they'd watched 100 times, but still needed to comment on. "She's over here again," one voice murmured. "Looks like she's casing the place," another replied, nodding toward Rex. "And that dog, no one really knows what it was trained for." Ariel couldn't catch the words, but she felt the weight of their stares. It was the kind of look that didn't need to be loud to be sharp, an unsettling blend of suspicion and disdain that made your skin prickle. Across the street, in the polished glass cafe Everbrew, sat Everett Mason, Millstone's mayor. Gray suit, deep blue silk tie, and espresso in hand. His silver hair was combed to a gleam, his slate-colored eyes tracking Ariel and Rex with a thin, almost imperceptible curl of the lips. Everett said nothing, but everyone in the cafe knew that look equal parts contempt and a quiet calculation that some people were simply clutter. He'd once told a closed-door meeting, "If we want Millstone to grow, we have to manage the loiterers, the poor, and those special circumstances." Rex lifted his head, ears folding halfway as if he'd caught something in the air he didn't. Like, Ariel reached down and brushed her fingers over his head, steadying him, and maybe herself too. The wind cut sharper as they passed a clothing boutique. The young clerk arranging a mannequin looked up and gave Ariel a thin smile, the kind that wasn't a greeting so much as a polite dismissal. Sugar-coated on the outside, but salt at the core. In Ariel's mind, the road between east and west wasn't just a street, it was a wall. And it had been built brick by invisible brick, from looks like that, from whispers she'd been hearing since she was a little girl. Their apartment sat on the third floor of a crumbling brick building. On the west side, where the hallway smelled faintly of damp carpet and old cooking oil. The stairs groaned under each step, as if protesting the weight of anyone who dared climb them. Naomi Daniels had been home since dawn, sitting at the small kitchen table with her back to the window, a cooling mug of black coffee cradled in her hands. She wore a faded army sweatshirt, the cuffs frayed from years of use. Her eyes, once so sharp and commanding, now carried the faraway glaze of someone who had seen too much. Too often that the nightmares came most nights. Ariel would hear them through the thin wall. Her mother's sharp intake of breath, the low mutter of names, sometimes a choked cry before silence settled again. Naomi never spoke about them in the morning. She just drank her coffee, stared at nothing in particular, and waited for the caffeine to pull her back into the present. Rex padded over to her now, resting his chin on her knee. She gave him a slow scratch behind the ears, murmuring something. Ariel couldn't hear. There was a gentleness in her touch for the dog that didn't often extend to the rest of the world anymore. "You were gone a while," Naomi said as Ariel set her backpack down. "Stopped at the library," Ariel replied. "Had to return some books before the late fee." Naomi nodded but didn't ask more. Money was tight enough without paying for late books, and Ariel knew better than to bring up anything that might add to her mother's mental list of things to worry about. Outside, the wind rattled the loose pane in the kitchen window. Ariel dropped a can of dog food into Rex's bowl, listening to the metallic thud echo in the cramped space. She'd been feeding him smaller portions lately, half cans, stretched with rice or scraps, because their grocery budget didn't always survive the month that Naomi noticed. She always did. But instead of scolding, she just sighed and said, "We'll be okay." Ariel wasn't sure if her mother believed it anymore. Life on the West Side wasn't just about what you didn't have. It was about what you couldn't get. Landlords refused to rent to tenants without steady pay stubs. Job applications disappeared into the ether the moment someone saw Naomi's military record flagged with PTSD. And when Ariel tried to join a school club or sports team, there always seemed to be fees they couldn't afford. Rex had his own kind of invisible burden. Some neighbors still saw him as a weapon, a remnant from his canine days. Once Mrs. Latham from 2 doors down had muttered, "That dog should be muzzled," even though Rex had done nothing but lie at Ariel's feet. The way people looked at him was the same way they looked at Naomi and Ariel, cautious, judgmental, as if waiting for them to slip up. It wasn't always like this. Ariel remembered a time before Naomi's last deployment when they'd lived in a small rental house with a yard big enough for Rex to run in. Back then, her mother laughed more. The 3 of them would walk to the ice cream shop in summer, Naomi in jeans and a tank top, hair pulled back, looking like she belonged anywhere. Now it seemed like the world had drawn a line and shoved them firmly to one side. That evening, as they sat together in the dim kitchen, Ariel caught her mother staring at a notice pinned to the fridge. It was from the electric company, printed in bold, "Final warning." Naomi didn't say a word, but her thumb rubbed over the corner of the paper again and again, as though she could erase it by touch alone. Outside, sirens wailed faintly on the east side. Ariel wondered if those sirens ever meant help was coming, or if they were only ever a warning that trouble had arrived. It was just past 4 in the afternoon when Ariel and Rex left the library. The sun was already slipping behind the ridge, turning the air colder, sharper. She tugged her coat tighter and picked up the pace, Rex limping slightly to match her stride. They were halfway down Maple Street when the patrol car rolled up behind them. The low hum of the engine made Rex's ears flick back. Ariel felt it before she saw it, that subtle tightening in her chest, the way her palms went damp around the leash. The cruiser eased to the curb beside them. The passenger window rolled down with a faint whir, and Officer Burke leaned out. He was middle-aged with a sun-reddened face and a smirk that seemed permanently etched there. "Afternoon," he drawled, eyes flicking from Ariel to Rex. "Where you headed?" "Home," Ariel said, trying to keep her voice even. Burke glanced at his partner in the driver's seat, a younger cop named Denny who was still watching Ariel like she might bolt. "You live around here?" "Yes, mind telling us your address?" Ariel hesitated. She knew this game. Give them what they wanted, and maybe they'd drive off, maybe. But something in Burke's tone told her it wouldn't matter. "Why?" she asked. Burke's smirk deepened, like he'd been waiting for that. Just doing our job. Got a call about a suspicious person walking a large dog. Matches your description. Rex shifted his weight, letting out a low whine. Ariel reached down to steady him. We're not doing anything wrong. Not yet, Burke said. But we can't be too careful. Big dog like that could be dangerous. He's not dangerous. Ariel shot back, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Denny finally spoke, his voice flat. Ma'am, for everyone's safety, we're gonna need to take the dog in for a quick check. Ariel's grip on the leash tightened. No, he's fine. Burke leaned farther out the window, eyes narrowing. Listen, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, you choose. Rex stiffened. Ariel could feel the tension in the leash, in his whole body. She thought about her mother, how Naomi always said to keep calm, stay respectful, and never give them an excuse. But right now, standing on a public sidewalk with 2 armed officers trying to take her dog, Ariel couldn't find that calm. Within minutes, another patrol car pulled up. By the time the second pair of officers stepped out, it didn't feel like a conversation anymore. It felt like a trap. Let's go, Burke said, stepping out of the cruiser. We'll take you both down to the station. Get this sorted out. Ariel's voice cracked despite her effort to hold it steady. We didn't do anything. No one answered. Denny took the leash from her hand, and Rex was led toward the second cruiser. Ariel wanted to yell, to fight, but her feet wouldn't move. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Pick your battles, kid. Sometimes surviving is the win. The door shut behind her with a hollow clunk. Through the glass, she saw Rex's face, pressed to the window of the other cruiser, ears pinned back, eyes searching for her dot. The station smelled faintly of bleach and stale coffee. Ariel sat on a hard plastic chair, her backpack at her feet, hands folded in her lap. She tried not to look at the clock, but each tick seemed to hammer the silence louder. Rex wasn't with her. They'd led him down a side hall the moment they arrived, Burke tossing over his shoulder. Kennels this way. Ariel had tried to follow, but a uniformed officer stepped in her path, palm up. Now, from somewhere beyond the cinder block walls, she thought she heard a bark, a short, sharp sound cut off too quickly. She swallowed hard, forcing her eyes down to her shoes. Burke leaned against the counter, filling out paperwork like he had all the time in the world. Denny stood nearby, arms folded, watching her with that same unreadable expression. So, Burke said finally, you want to tell us what you were doing over on Maple Street? Walking home, Ariel replied. From? The library. He scribbled something, then looked up. Why over there? Not a lot of people from your side of town come through the East End without a reason. Ariel kept her jaw tight. She knew what he meant, but she wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of reacting. Minutes stretched into half an hour. No one told her when she could leave. No one said how long they planned to keep Rex. She tried asking twice, once to Burke, once to a female officer passing through, but both times she got the same flat answer. We'll let you know. Across town, Naomi was walking back from the corner store when her phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar. This Mrs. Daniels? A voice asked. Yes. This is Officer Burke with Millstone PD. Your daughter's down here at the station. You'll need to come pick her up. Naomi stopped mid-step. What happened? Just some questions, Burke said, too casually. Better if we talk in person. By the time she reached the station, Naomi's pulse was a steady drumbeat. In her ears, she pushed through the glass doors, the smell of bleach and paper hitting her all at once. Burke looked up from behind the counter, and for the briefest moment, something like recognition passed between them, not the good kind. Ma'am, he said, tone shifting into a false politeness. We just needed to make sure everything was on the up and up. Where's my dog? Naomi asked. Burke blinked, as if surprised she'd start there. In holding. Standard procedure. Big dog, unknown background, known background, Naomi cut in. Military K9, honorably retired. He's not a threat. Burke's smile didn't reach his eyes. Still, regulations are regulations. Naomi didn't argue, not yet. She walked over to Ariel, resting a hand on her shoulder. You okay? Ariel nodded, but the tightness around her eyes said otherwise. When they finally left, Rex wasn't with them. Burke promised he'd be released after a quick check, but Naomi knew better than to take that at face value. She could feel it in her gut. Something about this stop wasn't about safety. It was about control. About reminding them exactly where they stood in Millstone's unspoken hierarchy. And she also knew one thing. She wasn't going to let it slide. The apartment was dark when they got back. Naomi didn't bother with the overhead light, just tossed her keys onto the counter and went straight to the corner where Rex's bed sat empty. Ariel dropped her backpack and sank onto the couch, curling into herself. Naomi could see the tremor in her hands, the way she stared at the carpet without really seeing it. They said they'll call when Rex is ready, Ariel murmured. Her voice was flat, like she didn't believe it any more than Naomi did. Naomi didn't answer right away. She crouched beside the dog bed, pulling out the small box that had sat beneath it for years. The cardboard was worn soft at the edges, its flaps frayed from opening and closing. Inside were bits of Rex's old gear, a faded nylon collar with his military ID tag, a weathered leather leash, a pouch for treats. And buried under it all a small palm-sized camera with a scratched lens cover. Naomi held it in her hand for a long moment. She hadn't thought about this in years. Back in his service days, Rex's handlers had strapped the camera to his harness during urban sweeps, part training tool, part documentation. When Naomi adopted him, she'd kept it out of habit, even letting him wear it sometimes on walks. Though she'd stopped reviewing the footage long ago. Now, the weight of it in her hand felt different. She turned it over, pressing the power button. The tiny screen flickered, grainy and dim, before blooming into a frozen frame. Rex's view of a sidewalk, a cruiser pulling up, two officers stepping out. Naomi's thumb hovered over the playback button. The video began to roll. From Rex's perspective, the world was a constant shift of angles. Ariel's legs beside him, the sway of the leash, the looming shape of Burke leaning down. The audio was muffled but clear enough. Burke's drawl, Denny's clipped responses, Ariel's voice trying to hold steady. Then came the line Naomi hadn't expected, spoken low but caught by the mic. Kids like this, always trouble. Especially with one of those dogs. Laughter followed two short, ugly bursts. Naomi's jaw tightened. She kept watching. She saw the moment they took the leash from Ariel's hand, the way Rex resisted, muscles bunching under his fur, until someone yanked hard enough to make him stumble. She saw Burke's hand push Ariel toward the cruiser, not roughly, but with that casual authority that said she had no choice. Naomi stopped the playback. Her reflection stared back at her from the black screen, older than she remembered, eyes harder. She slid the camera into her pocket. Ariel was still curled on the couch, but she looked up when Naomi spoke. Get some rest, Naomi said. Tomorrow we're going to have a conversation. With who? Naomi's voice was low, steady. Everyone who thinks they can get away with this. Naomi didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table with the laptop open, the glow of the screen making the dark circles under her eyes look deeper. The video from Rex's camera played on a loop, each replay cutting a little deeper, each laugh from the officers a little sharper. Around 2 a.m, she opened her contacts list and found a name she hadn't used in years. Lydia Hart, Heartline News. Lydia had been embedded with Naomi's unit for 3 months overseas, back when the worst thing either of them could imagine was an IED on the roadside. They'd shared cigarettes, bad coffee, and a handful of conversations that were more honest than anything Naomi had had since. She typed out a message, deleted it, typed again. Finally she just wrote, "Got something you need to see. Millstone PD, it's bad. Call me when you can. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. By the time the first gray light bled into the kitchen, Naomi had brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Ariel shuffled in, hair a tangled halo, eyes still swollen from the night before. Any word on Rex? She asked. Naomi shook her head. Not yet. But we're not waiting for them. What do you mean? Naomi slid the camera across the table. We're going to make sure people see what happened. Ariel picked it up, thumb brushing the worn casing. You think anyone will care? Naomi's gaze was steady. If they see it, they'll care. At 9, Lydia called. Her voice hadn't changed, still sharp, still carrying that undercurrent. I'm already 3 steps ahead of you, Naomi Daniels, she said. Didn't think I'd hear from you unless the world was ending. Maybe it is, Naomi replied. Talk to me. Naomi did. She told her everything. Maple Street. The stop, the holding cell, Rex. She didn't dress it up, didn't soften the edges. And when Lydia asked for proof, Naomi emailed the video file without hesitation. Silence stretched for a few beats after Lydia watched it. Then, Jesus. Yeah. You okay with this going public? I'm counting on it. By noon, Lydia's producer had the footage queued. By 4, it was clipped, captioned, and posted on Heartline's digital feed. The headline was blunt. Millstone police detain teen and retired military K9. Without cause, camera footage tells the story. The video racked up thousands of views in hours. Comments poured in, some angry, some defensive, some disbelieving. But the ones that mattered were from people in Millstone. This isn't the first time. They did the same thing to my nephew last year. Always the same wrong side of town, wrong color skin. By the time the sun set, the spark Naomi lit in the early hours was catching. And in the police station, someone was starting to smell smoke. By the next morning, Millstone wasn't the same quiet, divided town it had been 48 hours ago. The video had made its rounds: Facebook shares, group texts, even whispered conversations at the corner diner. Outside Everbrew Cafe, the mayor's usual morning table was occupied by Everett Mason himself, but this time he wasn't sipping. In peace. A woman in a blue windbreaker stood a few feet away, phone out, recording him as she asked, Mr. Mason, do you have any comment on the Daniels video? He smiled for the camera, but it was the politician's smile meant to hide more than it revealed. I haven't seen the full context, he said smoothly. But our police department keeps this community safe, and I trust their judgment. The woman didn't lower her phone. Even when it involves detaining a 16-year-old girl and taking her service dog without cause? Everett's jaw twitched, barely noticeable, but enough. Ma'am, I said I haven't seen the full context. He stood and walked away. Leaving his coffee half-finished. At the grocery store, Mrs. Joe from the bakery spoke in a low voice to another customer. I always said that dog was trouble. Now look, causing all this fuss. She didn't notice the young cashier stiffen at her words. Across town, a very different conversation was happening outside the community center. A group of veterans gathered on the steps, huddled around a phone screen. That's Daniel's kid, isn't it? One asked, voice thick with disbelief. Yeah, another replied. And that's Rex. He saved 2 guys in Kandahar. Now they've got him locked up like some stray. A murmur went through the group: anger, solidarity, the kind of quiet resolve that didn't need to be shouted to be dangerous. By mid-afternoon, Lydia Hart's segment had aired on the local evening news. The anchor's voice was measured, but the words carried weight. The footage, taken from a camera mounted on the dog's harness, appears to contradict the officer's account. Phones in the Millstone Police Department started ringing. Non-stop. Some calls were polite inquiries. Others were less polite. Inside the station, Burke leaned back in his chair, scrolling through comments on his phone. Bunch of internet warriors, he muttered. But Officer Denny wasn't so sure. He'd been on the force long enough to know when something was about to blow up. And this felt like standing on a gas leak with someone striking matches. Nearby, back at the Daniels apartment, Naomi sat at the table with Ariel, scrolling through messages. Support was pouring in, people she hadn't spoken to in years. Strangers from other towns. Even a few former police officers who said they'd seen the same thing happen too many times. But mixed in were the threats. "You're making trouble. Keep it up and you'll regret it." Naomi looked at her daughter. "This is going to get uglier before it gets better." Ariel's voice was quiet but certain. "Then we don't stop." If you'd been walking down Main Street that evening, you might have noticed the subtle shift. The way people's eyes lingered a little longer. The way conversations hushed when certain uniforms walked by. Millstone was awake now, and once a town wakes up, it's hard to make it go back to sleep. The call came just after noon. "This is Millstone PD," a clipped voice said. "You can come collect your animal. No apology, no explanation. Just an order." Naomi felt the muscles in her shoulders tighten. "We'll be there in 10. Ariel stood by the door, already pulling on her coat. Her eyes had the wary brightness of someone bracing for impact. At the station, the air was colder than it should have been, as if the building itself had absorbed the tension from the past 2 days. Burke was at the front desk, leaning back in his chair with his boots hooked on the rung. "Here for the dog?" he asked, not bothering to look up from the clipboard in front of him. Naomi's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Rex, yes." He motioned toward the back without standing. "Go ahead." As they walked down the hallway, Naomi caught sight of Officer Denny leaning against a doorframe. His eyes flicked to hers, then away, like he'd thought about saying something but decided against it. The kennel room smelled of disinfectant and damp concrete. Rex was in the last cage, lying with his head on his paws. At the sound of Ariel's voice, he lifted his head and thumped his tail once. Slow but deliberate. Ariel knelt, fingers sliding through the bars. "Hey buddy, we're taking you home." Naomi unlatched the cage. Rex stepped out, shaking himself like he was shedding the past 2 days off his fur. But Naomi's trained eyes saw the stiffness in his movements, the dryness around his nose. "You didn't feed him," she said flatly. The kennel attendant, a young man barely out of his teens, looked uncomfortable. "Orders were just water. Safety precaution." Naomi didn't answer. She clipped the leash onto Rex's collar and walked out, Ariel at her side. Every step toward the door felt like crossing a battlefield, eyes on them, whispers behind them. Outside, the winter sun was bright but cold. As they reached the car, Naomi noticed a figure standing across the street. Everett Mason, hands in his coat pockets, watching. There was no smile this time, no politician's mask, just that same assessing gaze, like he was measuring the trouble she could cause against the trouble she was worth. Naomi met his eyes and didn't look away. The message was clear. "I'm not afraid of you." On the drive home, Ariel sat in the back with Rex's head in her lap. She stroked his fur in long, steady lines, as if convincing both of them that he was really here, really safe. But Naomi's mind wasn't on safety. It was on the invisible line that had just been drawn in the sand. The past 48 hours had moved them from the quiet edges of Millstone's notice to the dead center of its politics. And once you're in the center, there's no going back. The days after Rex's return didn't feel like relief. They felt like a pause, a sharp inhale before whatever came next. Naomi kept the curtains drawn. Not out of fear exactly, but because every time she caught sight of someone slowing down outside their building, she wondered if they were there. To watch, to judge, or to warn. It wasn't paranoia. Not when she knew this town's memory worked differently for people like them. For some, a scandal faded in a week. For others, it stuck like tar. Naomi's military career had been defined by 2 things, competence and survival. She had risen through the ranks by keeping her head down, getting the job done, and never giving anyone an excuse to question her. But that discipline didn't translate well to civilian life. Her last deployment had been the hardest. The roadside blast that injured Rex had been the same one that sent Naomi home with nerve damage in her left shoulder and a case of PTSD she didn't talk about. Nights were the worst, waking up with the smell of burning rubber in her nose, the flash of heat across her skin, the sound of Rex barking in the chaos. When she adopted him officially, the paperwork had called it reassignment to civilian handler. Naomi called it keeping the only partner who had my back when it counted. That Ariel had been 11 when Naomi came home for good. The first year was a mess. Naomi trying to parent like she was still leading a squad. Ariel trying to figure out who this quiet, tense woman was and what she'd done with her mom. They'd gotten better at it, but there were still days when Naomi's silences lasted too long and Ariel's patience too short. Now, at 16, Ariel carried her own kind of armor. She didn't flinch at stares anymore. She met them head on, though sometimes with a sharpness that made trouble find her faster. She'd inherited her mother's stubborn streak, but also her inability to forgive injustice. Rex was the glue between them, always had been. He knew Naomi's moods before she spoke and Ariel's sadness before she admitted it. If Naomi's voice was too tight, Rex would nudge her leg until she loosened. If Ariel slammed a door, Rex would sit outside it until she opened it again. After his 2 days at the station, Rex followed Ariel everywhere, close enough that his fur brushed her knee. Naomi noticed the way his ears twitched at sudden sounds, the slight hesitation before he stepped into the hallway. They weren't the only ones changed by that stop on Maple Street. At the grocery store, conversation still dipped when they walked past. A few people nodded in quiet solidarity. A mechanic Naomi barely knew slipped a coupon for dog food into her hand without a word. But others looked at her like she'd committed the crime, not been the target of it. Even Ariel's school wasn't neutral ground. In the hallway, she overheard a boy say, "That's the girl with the attack dog." She didn't bother correcting him, but the heat in her chest stayed all day. That night, Naomi sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, making a list. Names, dates, contacts. She didn't just want to win a public opinion battle. She wanted to change the ground rules in Millstone. But she knew that meant going after people with the power to make life very hard for her and Ariel. She tapped the pen against the page, then wrote a single line under the last name. They started this. "We finish it." The first sign came 3 days after Rex was home. Naomi stepped outside to find a parking ticket tucked under her windshield wiper. She stared at it, then at the perfectly legal spot she'd been parking in for years. The citation read, "Improper alignment with curb." She crumpled it without reading the fine. The next day, Ariel came home pale and tight-lipped. She tossed her backpack on the floor and went straight to her room. Naomi knocked once, then twice, before Ariel opened the door. "What happened?" "Mr. Carver said I couldn't bring Rex to the school's volunteer fair," Ariel said. "He said it would make people uncomfortable." Naomi's jaw clenched. "Did you tell him Rex is certified?" "I did. He didn't care." Ariel's voice cracked, but she forced it steady again. "They're making it about the dog because they can't say what they really mean." It was a slow grind, small things that didn't look like much on paper, but built into something heavy enough to carry in your bones. The mail started arriving late. Naomi's request for a job interview at the hardware store went unanswered, even though she'd gotten a polite, "Come by next week," in person just a month ago. On the street, uniforms seemed to linger longer. When she and Ariel passed, the breaking point came on a cold Friday evening. Ariel was walking Rex home from the park when a black SUV pulled up to the curb. 2 boys from her school leaned out the window, grinning. "Hey, attack dog," one of them shouted. "Better keep him on a leash or someone's gonna shoot him." Rex bristled, ears forward. Ariel's grip tightened. "Shut up," she snapped. The SUV idled beside her for half a block. "Careful," the second boy said, mock warning in his voice. "Cops might think you're dangerous again." Ariel stopped dead. Her heart pounded, but it wasn't fear, it was heat, raw and rising fast. She was 1 second away from saying something that would set this whole thing ablaze. Then she felt a weight against her leg. Rex, pressing close, looking up at her. She exhaled through her teeth, turned away, and walked. The SUV revved and sped off. By the time she got home, she was shaking. Naomi didn't have to ask why. That night, Naomi sat in the dark with the phone in her hand. The screen lit up with Lydia Hart's name. "You were right," Lydia said when Naomi answered. "This isn't dying down. And I think they're going to push you until you either break or push back harder." Naomi looked across the room at Ariel, curled up with Rex on the couch, his head resting on her lap. "Then I guess," Naomi said quietly, "we push back." It was Sunday afternoon when the knock came. 3 sharp raps, then silence. Naomi opened the door to find 2 men standing in the hallway, both in worn jackets, both with that unmistakable posture of people who'd spent years in uniform. "Daniels?" the taller one asked. His voice had the gravel of a pack-a-day smoker. "That's me." "I'm Harlan," he said, jerking a thumb toward his companion. "This is Cortez. We served with your unit's sister company back in '09. Naomi searched their faces, and something clicked. Faces from a dusty photo she hadn't thought about in years. "All right," she said slowly. "What brings you here?" Harlan glanced down the hallway, then stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Cortez followed, closing the door behind him. "We saw the footage," Harlan said, "and we saw what's been happening since." Naomi crossed her arms. "A lot of people have seen it." "Yeah," Cortez said, "but most people can't do anything about it. We can." Ariel had drifted into the living room, Rex close at her side. She looked from the strangers to her mother, trying to read the situation. Harlan pulled a folded sheet of paper from his jacket. It was a petition, handwritten names filling both sides. "We've been talking to folks. Veterans, old-timers. A few business owners who aren't afraid to piss off City Hall. We want to push for an oversight board. Civilian review for every complaint against the PD." Naomi took the paper, scanning the signatures. Some she recognized, some surprised her. "You think they'll let this happen?" "They won't," Harlan said bluntly. "Not without a fight. But with you. You've got the story, the proof. And people are already listening." Cortez leaned forward. "We're not saying it's gonna be easy. You know what happens when you go after the ones holding the strings." Naomi did know. All too well. She glanced at Ariel, who was scratching behind Rex's ear. Ariel's eyes met hers steady, unflinching. "What do you think, kid?" Naomi asked. Ariel didn't hesitate. "If they're scared of people knowing the truth, then that's the truth we need to tell." Harlan's smile just a flicker, but it was there. "We've got a meeting Wednesday night at the community center. Off the books. You should come." Naomi nodded once. "We'll be there." As the 2 men left, Rex padded to the window and watched them walk down the street, his ears pricked. Naomi stood beside him, watching too, feeling the weight of what had just been set in motion. The line between surviving and fighting back had always been thin. Today, she'd stepped over it. The community center's back room smelled faintly of dust and old coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a flat, cold glow over the mismatched folding chairs, arranged in a rough circle. Naomi pushed the door open, Ariel at her side with Rex padding close. Conversations dipped the moment they stepped in, not hostile, but weighted. The way a room shifts when the subject of discussion suddenly walks through the door. Harlan waved them over. "Glad you made it." Around the circle sat about 15 people. Some wore worn leather jackets with patches from long-ago units. Others were in work clothes, flannel shirts, oil stains still on their sleeves. A few faces Naomi recognized from around town, though she couldn't recall their names. And then there were the ones she didn't know at all, two young men in hoodies. A middle-aged woman with a notepad already open in her lap. Harlan cleared his throat. All right. We're here for one reason. What happened on Maple Street is just the latest in a long line of crap that's been going on in Millstone. And this time, we've got proof. A murmur rippled through the room. The woman with the notepad glanced at Naomi. You have the original footage? Naomi nodded. And backups, multiple. Good, the woman said. Because they'll come after it. Cortez leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. We've been tracking complaints against the PD for years. Excessive stops. Harassment, selective enforcement. But without video, it's always their word against yours. This, he gestured toward Naomi, changes that. One of the younger men in hoodies spoke up. Changes it how? They'll just say it's taken out of context. Naomi met his gaze. Then we give them all the context they can handle. The conversation turned practical. Petitions, letters to the editor, calls to state representatives. Ariel sat quietly. At first, but when the discussion veered toward whether the town's younger generation even cared, she spoke up. You think we don't care? She said, her voice sharper than she meant it to be. I walk through the east side every week. I know exactly what they think when they see me. And it's not just about me, it's about what they've decided I am before I even open my mouth. That's what you're fighting, right? Not just the cops. The whole mindset that says some people matter less. The room went still for a moment. Then the middle-aged woman tapped her pen against her notepad. Kid's right. If this is going to work, it has to be more than a veteran thing. We need everyone who's been on the wrong side of that badge. By the end of the meeting, there was no formal vote, no official plan, just a quiet agreement. Next week, there would be a rally in front of City Hall. Not a march, not yet, but a public show of numbers. Naomi shook hands with Harlan before leaving. You know, once we do this, we're on their radar for good, she said. Harlan's smile was grim. We've all been on their radar. The difference now is we're looking back. Outside, the cold bit hard. Ariel zipped her coat and glanced at her mother. Do you think this is going to work? Naomi didn't answer right away. She looked down at Rex, who stood steady beside them, his breath puffing in the winter air. I think, she said finally, we're past the point of asking if it will work. Now we find out what we're made of. By Monday morning, the undercurrent in Millstone had turned into a steady pulse you could feel just walking down Main Street. In the diner, conversations that used to be about football scores or the price of gas now circled back to the rally. Half the booths were in support. It's about time someone said something. The other half muttered about troublemakers and outsiders trying to stir the pot. Even though Naomi had lived here longer than some of them had been alive, the first rumor hit by lunchtime. A local Facebook group posted a grainy photo of Naomi from years ago, fatigues, helmet tucked under her arm, dust on her face, and captioned it, "Is this the woman leading the charge against our police? Check her record before you decide." Within hours, the comment section was a swamp. PTSD, she's unstable. Probably just mad because she couldn't get a job on the force. Wouldn't be surprised if the kid's trouble too. Ariel saw it before Naomi did. She was sitting in the school library, scrolling through her phone, when the image popped up. The screen blurred as her eyes stung, but she kept scrolling, like if she saw enough of it, it would stop hurting. It didn't. By the time she got home, Naomi already knew. Lydia Hart had called her. "They're going personal," Lydia said. "They want to discredit you before you even get a chance to speak." Naomi paced the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. "Let them. We've got the footage. We've got the truth." "Truth doesn't always win," Lydia said, her voice low. "You know that." Then, unexpectedly, Rex became the story. A blogger from a nearby city picked up Lydia's segment and wrote a piece titled, From war zones to small town streets, the service dog they called Dangerous. It included photos from Rex's military service gear strapped to his harness, eyes locked forward in the middle of a dusty alley overseas, and compared them to stills from the Maple Street stop. The article went viral in its own small way. People shared it with captions like, "Look at this hero, and this is who they took from a 16-year-old girl." By Wednesday, Naomi couldn't go to the grocery store without someone bending down to pet Rex, telling him he was a good boy, whispering, "You deserved better." But support came with its own kind of risk. One night, someone slipped an envelope under their door. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Call off your rally." Last warning. Naomi held it up to the light, jaw tight. Ariel leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "They're scared," she said. Naomi set the paper down. "Good. If you'd been in Millstone that week, you would have felt it. The air charged like before a storm, the kind where you can taste the electricity." And standing in the middle of it all were Naomi, Ariel, and a German shepherd who'd seen too many battlefields to be rattled by the sound of distant thunder. Saturday. Morning came gray and windless, the kind of day where sound carried too far. By 9, the steps of City Hall were already filling. On one side, a cluster of veterans in old service jackets, parents holding signs, teenagers with phones ready to stream. "Justice for Ariel and Rex," read one banner, the paint still fresh. On the other side, closer to the street, a smaller group stood with folded arms and homemade signs of their own. "Support our PD. Keep Millstone safe." Some wore sunglasses even though the sun wasn't out, like they didn't want to be recognized. Or maybe they just didn't want to look anyone in the eye. Naomi stood halfway up the steps, Ariel and Rex beside her. She could feel the hum in the air, not excitement, not exactly fear, but that unstable mix that could tip either way with the wrong word. Harlan was speaking first. His voice carried easily over the crowd. "We're not here to tear down Millstone," he said. "We're here because we love it enough to want it better. No one should be stopped, questioned, or have their property taken without cause, no matter what side of town they live on." Cheers broke out from the supporters, met almost instantly with a few shouted, "Obey the law." From across the street, Ariel's eyes were scanning the crowd when she saw him, Burke, standing near the back of the pro-PD group, arms crossed. His gaze was locked on Naomi, unreadable but unblinking. She leaned toward her mother. "He's here." "I know," Naomi said without looking. When it was Naomi's turn to speak, she stepped up to the mic. Her voice was steady. "2 weeks ago, my daughter and our dog were detained for walking home. The officers involved have yet to explain why. But this," she gestured to the crowd, "both sides, this is the bigger issue. It's about whether we accept that kind of power being used without accountability. Today it happened to us. Tomorrow it could be you." For a moment, the only sound was the wind catching the banners. Then someone in the pro-PD group shouted, "Maybe you should have taught your kids some respect." The tension broke like glass. Voices rose on both sides. A few people surged forward, closing the gap between the groups. A police officer, one Naomi didn't know, stepped in, hands up, trying to keep the lines from colliding. And then it happened. A sudden, sharp yelp from Rex. Ariel whipped around to see a man pulling his hand back, eyes wide in feigned innocence. "Dog bit me," he shouted. "He didn't touch you." Ariel's voice cut through the chaos, but it was too late. 2 officers were already moving toward Rex, hands on their belts. Naomi stepped between them and the dog, her voice like steel. "You're not taking him again." The crowd was roaring. Now phones raised, people shoving closer. Somewhere in the mess, Lydia Hart's camera was catching every second. That was the moment the air truly cracked, the second Millstone's quiet war stopped being quiet. By the time Naomi, Ariel, and Rex made it back to their apartment, the rally was already all over the news. Clips of the shouting match, The moment Rex yelped, and Naomi stepping in front of the officers played on repeat local channels, social media feeds, even a couple of regional stations that normally ignored Millstone. The headlines told two completely different stories. Citizen stands up to PD at Millstone rally, from the outlets that had been following Lydia's coverage. Rally turns chaotic. Service dog aggression sparks safety concerns. From the ones leaning on the police press release, the official statement from the Millstone PD came within hours. During today's public demonstration, a police canine was approached in a threatening manner by another large dog, prompting immediate intervention to ensure public safety. The animal in question will not be taken into custody at this time, but an investigation is ongoing. They'd left out the part where the threatening manner was Rex sitting beside Ariel, tail still, until a stranger bent down and grabbed at him. Naomi's phone buzzed nonstop calls from all eyes, from reporters, from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Some were offers to help. Others were warnings. One text from an unknown number read, "This isn't DC, you won't win here." At the kitchen table, Harlan was pacing. He'd come over straight after the rally. "They're going to use this," he said. "They'll make it about the dog, not the stop on Maple Street. That's how they bury the story." Naomi leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Then we don't let them. We show every angle, every second of what really happened." Lydia's voice came over speakerphone. "I've got the footage," she said. "Clean, multiple angles. The guy who went after Rex was part of the pro-PD crowd. He's in other shots talking to Burke before it happened." Ariel's head snapped up. "You think they planned it?" "I think," Lydia said, "they were ready for anything that could make you look bad." That night, Naomi sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. Fighting this meant more eyes on them, more risk. Ariel was 16, still a kid, no matter how strong she acted, and Rex. He'd already been through too much, but she also knew the truth. Once you've stood your ground in front of City Hall with the town watching, you can't step back without handing them the win. Naomi reached down, resting her hand on Rex's head. "We're in it now, partner," she murmured, "all the way." By Sunday morning, Naomi had made her decision. No waiting. No drip-feeding the story. No letting the PD control the narrative. She called Lydia at 7 a.m. "I want it all out," she said. "Maple Street, the kennel footage, the rally, everything." Lydia didn't hesitate. "Send me your copies. I'll have my editor cut it so no one can claim it's spliced." By noon, the full Rex tape was live on Heartlines. Site. It ran 26 minutes, unbroken. The patrol car pulling up beside Ariel on Maple Street. Burke taking the leash, Denny steering Ariel toward the cruiser. The muffled laughter about kids like this. The empty kennel room, timestamped for 2 days. The rally footage, Rex sitting still until a man in a red ball cap reached down and yanked at his collar, followed by his startled yelp and Naomi stepping in front of him. No commentary. No edits, just the facts in order with timestamps. The effect was immediate. Within hours, larger outlets picked it up. A morning news panel in the state capitol ran the clip back to back, with one commentator shaking her head. "If this is accurate," she said, "the question isn't whether the officers acted within policy, it's whether the policy itself is broken." A National Service Dog Advocacy group tweeted the link with the caption, "Retired military canine treated like a threat. This is why training and accountability matter." In Millstone, the divide sharpened. Some residents printed out stills from the tape and taped them in shop windows. Ariel's face beside Rex's. The words, "We stand with them," in bold marker. Others muttered about media hit jobs and outside agitators, even though the footage came straight from Rex's own camera. By late afternoon, Naomi's phone rang. It was a number she recognized. City Hall, Ms. Daniels. The voice on the other end said, "This is Mayor Mason. We'd like to set up a meeting to discuss a resolution." Naomi kept her voice level. A resolution for who? For everyone, Mason said smoothly. Let's be reasonable. She almost laughed. Reasonable was 2 weeks ago. You passed on that. There was a pause. Think it over, Mason said, and hung up. That night, Naomi and Ariel sat on the couch, with Rex sprawled between them, his head heavy on Ariel's lap. Outside, the street was quiet, but Naomi could feel the ripple building momentum. Pressure, something bigger than Millstone itself. For the first time since Maple Street, she thought maybe, just maybe, they could win. The meeting was set for Wednesday afternoon. Naomi arrived 5 minutes early, Ariel at school, Rex at home with Harlan's wife. She wore her old service jacket, not to make a point, but because it was the warmest thing she owned, that didn't have a tear in it. The City Hall receptionist led her down a quiet corridor she'd never been in before. The walls were painted a bland beige, and the fluorescent lights buzzed like insects trapped in glass dot when they reached the end. The receptionist opened a door. In here, the room had no windows. Just a long conference table, a water pitcher, and 3 men already. Seated, Mayor Mason, Chief Grady of the Millstone PD. And a man Naomi didn't recognize. Sharp suit, lawyer's eyes. Ms. Daniels, Mason said with a politician's smile. Thank you for coming, Naomi sat, keeping her coat on. You said you wanted to discuss a resolution. Chief Grady leaned forward, hands clasped. We're prepared to offer a formal statement, clarifying that your daughter and the dog were not under investigation for any crime. Naomi raised an eyebrow. That's not an apology. The suited man spoke for the first time. It's as close as you'll get without litigation. Naomi's jaw tightened. And in return? Mason's smile didn't change. You agree to stop publicizing the footage, withdraw your support from the rally group, and refrain from making further statements that inflame the situation. It was a bribe wrapped in diplomacy. A quiet erasure in exchange for a line or two on official letterhead. Naomi took a sip of water, giving herself a moment to breathe. You think you can wait me out, she said. You think the heat will die down if you dangle just enough to make me doubt myself. Grady's eyes hardened. We're offering you a way to avoid more trouble. For you and your kid. The threat was as thinly veiled as the smile on Mason's face. Naomi stood. If this is the best you've got, then we're done here. Think about your daughter, the lawyer said. Naomi's voice was ice. I am. She walked out, the door closing behind her with a flat, heavy click. Outside, the winter air felt sharper than it had going in. She took a deep breath, pulled out her phone, and sent a single text to Lydia. They want me quiet. Guess what happens next? Naomi didn't wait. That same evening, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, Rex stretched out under her feet, and Ariel sitting across from her with her phone ready. The living room lamp was their only light. Are you sure? Ariel asked. Once you put this out there, Naomi nodded. Once you tell the truth, you can't take it back. That's the point. She began typing, fingers steady. Today, I sat in a closed-door meeting with the mayor of Millstone, the chief of police, and their attorney. They offered to clarify that my daughter and Rex were never suspects if I agreed to stop sharing the footage and withdraw from the rally movement. They want silence in exchange for a scrap of dignity. I told them no. To anyone reading this. Accountability doesn't happen in rooms with no windows. It happens when the public sees the truth, even when it's ugly. Especially when it's ugly. She hit post and leaned back. Now we see what happens. They didn't have to wait long. By morning, the post had been shared thousands of times. News outlets outside the state picked it up. A veterans group in Illinois, they hold their own solidarity rally. A service dog advocacy page reposted the entire full Rex tape with Naomi's statement attached. The hashtag #JusticeForRex trended regionally by noon, but visibility cuts both ways. That afternoon, A pickup truck rolled slow past their building. The driver didn't look up, but the passenger leaned out just far enough for Ariel to see the phone in his hand, pointed at their window. That night, Naomi found their mailbox hanging open, empty except for a single index card with 3 words. Written in black marker, "Drop IT, now." Harlan stopped by the next day, jaw set. "You're in it deep now," he said. "They're not going to play nice anymore." Naomi scratched behind Rex's ears. They never were. If Millstone had been tense before, it was a live wire now. The next rally wasn't just a local event, it was shaping up to be a test case for what happens when a small town PD gets called out and refuses to blink. And Naomi knew something else. The more people watching, the more desperate the other side would get to make her disappear from the story. It happened on a Thursday evening, just after sunset. Ariel had taken Rex downstairs for his usual walk. The street was too quiet for that time of day. They'd barely made it past the corner when Rex froze, head snapping toward the mouth of the alley. Ariel followed his gaze but saw nothing, just deep shadow between the brick buildings. Then a sound. PFFFT. Soft, wrong, like a hiss of air. Rex yelped and lurched sideways, nearly pulling the leash from her hands. Ariel dropped to her knees, heart slamming against her ribs. There, just behind his shoulder, a small red welt was already rising through his fur. She didn't think. She ran, all the way back to the apartment, Rex limping beside her. Naomi was at the door before she could knock. "What?" Something hit him. Ariel's voice cracked. I think someone shot him with something." Naomi's training took over. She grabbed a flashlight, parting Rex's fur around the welt. No puncture deep enough for a bullet, thank God, but there was a tiny metallic pellet lodged just under the skin. She'd seen this before. BB gun. 20 minutes later, Rex was lying on a blanket, the pellet removed, Ariel holding an ice pack against his side. Naomi stood at the window, scanning the street. "They're sending a message," she said finally. Ariel looked up. "You think it's because of the post?" Naomi turned from the glass. "I think it's because we didn't take the deal." Harlan came by when he heard. His face was grim. "We can keep someone outside the building at night. Rotate shifts." Naomi shook her head. "We can't live like we're under siege." "You already are," Harlan said. That night, Naomi sat on the couch with Ariel curled against one side, and Rex's head heavy on the other. She could feel both of their heartbeats, one racing, one steady but tired. She thought about pulling back, staying quiet until things cooled. It would be safer, easier, but then she remembered the alley, the hiss of air, the way Rex had yelped. And she knew, pulling back wouldn't make them safer. It would just tell whoever was behind this that it worked. Naomi reached for her phone and typed a message to Lydia. They came after Rex. Double the coverage, no more holding back. By sunrise, Naomi already had the photos. One close-up of the welt on Rex's shoulder, another of the small BB pellet resting in her palm. Ariel had taken them the night before, hands still shaking. But the shots were sharp and undeniable. She sent them to Lydia with a single line. "Post with context, all of it." By mid-morning, Heartline News had the story up. Retired military K-9 targeted days after refusing gag deal with city officials. The article laid it out piece by piece, how Naomi had turned down the City Hall meetings offer, how the mailbox warning came next, and now how Rex had been shot with a BB gun during a routine walk. Lydia embedded the rally footage again, and the Maple Street stop, creating a timeline that was impossible to ignore. Within hours, the piece was being quoted by bigger outlets. A national cable network picked it up under their Justice segment, running Rex's military service, photos side by side with the image of his injury. Messages poured in. A retired police captain from another state emailed, "If this happened on my watch, heads would roll. Stay strong." A woman from Texas wrote, "I have a retired K9 too. What they're doing is beyond shameful. Tell me where to send money for legal fees." The Service Dog Advocacy Group launched a GoFundMe with a goal of $20,000. By the end of the day, it had passed $35,000 in Millstone. The pressure cooker hissed louder. Supporters put up new posters, this time with Rex's injured shoulder in full color. The words, "He served. Now we protect him." But the other side wasn't going quiet. The pro-PD Facebook group claimed the injury was self-inflicted for sympathy. A phrase so absurd Ariel laughed when she read it, until she saw how many people believed it. That evening, Naomi stood in the kitchen, phone to her ear. Lydia's voice was taut with urgency. "The governor's office called me. They want a statement from you for their weekly press conference." Naomi's first instinct was to refuse. This wasn't about politics. But then she thought about the alley, about Rex's startled yelp. If this was the only way to force Millstone into the light, then so be it. "Tell them I'll be there," she said. As she hung up, Ariel came in with Rex close behind, his gait a little stiff but eyes alert. "They're not going to like this," Ariel said. Naomi knelt, resting her hand on Rex's neck. "They weren't going to like anything we did. Now we make sure they can't ignore it." The state capitol building always looked larger on TV. In person, Naomi found it cold marble floors that amplified every step, tall ceilings that made voices echo like they belonged to someone else. She arrived early, escorted through a side entrance by a young aide who spoke in quick bursts. "Governor's statement first, then your turn at the podium. Questions will come after. Keep it tight, keep it clear. The press pool's hungry." Naomi almost smiled. She'd faced insurgents with less tension in their voices. When the cameras went live, the governor opened with policy talk, budget numbers, infrastructure, something about flood mitigation. Naomi stood just off to the side, her hands in the pockets of her service jacket, waiting for the pivot she knew was coming. "And now," the governor said, "I want to address an issue that has come to symbolize something bigger than a single town." They gestured toward her. Naomi stepped forward. The microphones looked like a small forest, each one labeled with a different outlet. The lights were hot on her face. "I'm Naomi Daniels," she began. "2 weeks ago, my 16-year-old daughter and our retired military K9 Rex were stopped on the street in Millstone without cause. He was taken from her and held for 2 days. We have the footage, his own service camera, that shows exactly what happened. Since then, we've been harassed, threatened, and just days ago, Rex was shot with a BB gun during a walk." She let the weight of the words hang before continuing. "This isn't just about us. It's about whether the people sworn to protect us can operate without answering to anyone. I served my country overseas. I didn't do that so my daughter would grow up afraid of the people in uniform on her own street." Hands shot up. The governor's aide pointed to a reporter near the front. "Ms. Daniels, do you believe the attack on your dog was connected to the police department?" Naomi met the reporter's gaze. "I believe it was connected to someone who wants this story to go away. And I believe the department has done nothing to stop it." Before the next question could be asked, another voice called out from the back, deep, steady. "I can answer that." The room shifted. Cameras turned. A man stepped forward from the press pool, except he wasn't carrying a camera or a notepad. He was wearing a plain gray suit, no tie, and his face was one Naomi recognized. After a moment's search of memory, "Officer Denny, I resigned last night," Denny said, loud enough for every mic to catch it. "And yes, there are people inside the department who knew exactly what was going to happen at that rally. Some of them were in the crowd. Some of them were giving orders." The room exploded, reporters shouting over each other, cameras snapping like machine gun fire. Naomi stood frozen for a beat, her mind already racing ahead. Denny's eyes met hers. There was no apology there, but there was something else, The look of a man who decided he'd had enough. If you'd been watching on TV, you'd have seen the governor trying to restore order, security moving toward Denny, and Naomi stepping back from the podium, not in retreat, but in recognition. This fight had just jumped to a whole new level. They didn't let Denny leave the Capitol alone. 2 state troopers flanked him as they guided him down a side hallway, Naomi just a few steps behind. When the door closed behind them, the noise of the press conference faded into a heavy, humming silence. Denny pulled a folded envelope from inside his jacket and handed it to Naomi. "I don't have copies of everything," he said. "Some of this is handwritten, some printed from the department server. You'll want to keep it somewhere safe." Naomi slid the envelope into her bag without opening it. "What's in there?" "Shift logs, text messages between officers, and a briefing memo from the chief's office dated the day before your rally." Her stomach tightened. "What does it say?" Denny's voice dropped. "It says, coordinate with community allies to maintain order at demonstration. Any incident involving the Daniels dog should be treated as a safety risk." Naomi's breath caught. Any incident. Not if the dog attacks, not in the event of aggression. "Just any incident, you're telling me," she said slowly. They were waiting for something to happen so they could justify taking Rex again. "I'm telling you," Denny replied. "Someone made sure something did happen." Later that night, in her kitchen, Naomi spread the documents across the table. Ariel sat opposite her, reading silently, her lips pressed into a thin line. The texts were worse than Naomi expected. One from Burke: "Make sure our guy is in the front. If he gets close to the mutt, even better." Another from an unknown number: "Chief says optics matter. Don't miss your chance." Ariel looked up. "They were planning it from the start." Naomi nodded. "And now we can prove it." By morning, Lydia had the scans. "If this is authenticated," she said over the phone, "we're talking about coordinated misconduct, possibly criminal conspiracy. They won't just fight this in the press anymore. They'll fight it like their jobs and pensions depend on it." "Because they do," Naomi said. That afternoon, Harlan stopped by. "Word is," he said, "some of the pro-PD crowd isn't happy about Denny flipping. They'll try to paint him as bitter, unstable. And if that doesn't work, they'll make sure he regrets it." Naomi glanced toward the living room, where Ariel was curled on the couch with Rex. "Then we make sure he's not standing alone." Somewhere in Millstone, Naomi knew people were already making new plans that didn't involve flyers or Facebook posts. Plans meant to scare, to break, maybe even to harm Dot, and for the first time since Maple Street, she felt the edge of real danger pressing in. It was just past 8 p.m. when Naomi turned onto their block. The first thing she noticed was the smell, sharp and acrid, riding the cold night air like a warning. Ariel, in the passenger seat, wrinkled her nose. "Something's burning." Naomi's foot pressed harder on the gas. Halfway down the street, she saw it, a thin plume of smoke curling upward from the front steps of their building. By the time she braked hard at the curb, the shape became clear: 2 blackened trash bags, still smoldering, leaning against their door. "Stay in the car," Naomi said. Already out before Ariel could answer, she approached slow, scanning the shadows. No figures, no retreating footsteps, just the low hiss of heat eating through plastic. She grabbed the small fire extinguisher from the trunk and doused it until only a wet, chemical smell lingered. When she kicked one of the bags open, the contents spilled onto the sidewalk: shredded newspapers, spray-painted words across a torn piece of cardboard. "Get out." By the time Harlan arrived, Naomi had moved Ariel and Rex inside and locked every door and window. "This isn't a warning anymore," Harlan said, his eyes sweeping the mess on the stoop. "It's a line in the sand. They want you scared enough to stop showing up in public." Naomi leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Then they really don't know me." Ariel was quieter than usual that night. sitting on the couch with Rex's head in her lap. What if next time it's not just trash? She asked. Naomi sat beside her. Then we deal with it. Just like every other time they've tried to push us back. Ariel's voice was small. You're not scared? Naomi didn't lie. Of course I'm scared. But fear's not the same thing as stopping. Later, after Ariel had gone to bed, Naomi stood at the window looking out at the street. Somewhere out there, someone had lit those bags and walked away without looking back. Someone who believed they could control the story through fire and smoke. Naomi reached down, resting her hand on Rex's head. Let them come, she whispered. We're not done yet. 2 mornings after the fire bags, Naomi was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of documents Denny had given her. The shift logs, the texts, the briefing memo, every page was a loaded weapon. She'd been holding back, letting Lydia drip-feed pieces to the press. Not anymore. When Ariel walked in, still rubbing sleep from her eyes, Naomi slid the stack toward her. I'm going to the State House again, this time with everything. Ariel froze halfway to the fridge. All of it? Even the rally memo? Especially the rally memo. By noon, Naomi and Harlan were on the road, a manila envelope on the seat between them. The plan wasn't subtle. She would hand the evidence directly to the state attorney general's office, bypassing every local authority in Millstone. Lydia was waiting for them in the Capitol, already wired for sound, camera crew in tow. We'll stream the whole drop, she said. If anyone tries to stop you, the world will see it live. Naomi didn't flinch. Good, let them. The footage went out in real time. Naomi walking up the marble steps, the envelope under her arm, Harlan at her side. The AG's spokesperson met them at the door. This is sensitive material, Naomi said for the microphones. It documents coordinated misconduct by multiple members of the Millstone Police Department, including directives to incite an incident at a lawful demonstration. She handed over the envelope. The cameras caught the exact moment the spokesperson's expression changed, eyebrows lifting, mouth tightening before they ushered her inside. By the time Naomi stepped back into the sunlight, her phone was buzzing. Non-stop, messages from strangers, proud of you. From allies, they can't bury this now. And from an unknown number, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. That night in Millstone, 2 unmarked cars were seen slowly circling Naomi's block, no plates on the front. No one ever got out. Ariel watched from the window. Rex pressed close to her leg. They're not even trying to hide it, she said. No, Naomi replied. They want us to know they're watching. If Millstone had been a slow burn for weeks, Naomi had just thrown gasoline on it in full view of the state. And she knew, deep down, that the next move from the other side wouldn't be intimidation. It would be something meant to break her. It happened less than 24 hours after Naomi handed over the envelope. Ariel had stayed late at school for a group project. Naomi was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when her phone rang. The number was blocked. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something in her gut told her to answer. Ms. Daniels, a man's voice said, calm, low, too measured. You need to collect your daughter. She's safe for now, but accidents happen when you make enemies. Naomi's grip tightened on the knife handle. Who is this? The line clicked dead. She grabbed her keys and was halfway out the door when Rex whined at the threshold, as if sensing the shift in the air. Naomi glanced at the street before locking up. No unmarked cars tonight. That somehow made it worse. She found Ariel outside the school library, completely unaware. What's wrong? Ariel asked when Naomi took her by the arm. We're going home, now. Back at the apartment, Naomi paced while Ariel sat cross-legged on the couch with Rex leaning into her. They called you? Ariel said finally. Naomi nodded. They wanted me to know they can get close, that this isn't just about me anymore. Ariel's voice was steady in a way that made her seem older than 16. So what do we do? Quit? Naomi stopped pacing. That's exactly what they want. Later that night, Harlan came by with 2 other veterans from the rally group. They brought gear, cheap security cameras, motion sensors, extra locks. This isn't forever, Harlan said as he drilled a bracket into the doorframe. Just until the heat dies down. Naomi shook her head. The heat's not dying down. It's about to spike. She wasn't wrong. The next morning, the Millstone PD released a statement accusing her of reckless dissemination of unverified materials and hinted at possible criminal charges for interference with official duties. They weren't just threatening her safety anymore. They were threatening her freedom. Naomi sat at the kitchen table, the statement pulled up on her laptop. Ariel stood beside her, one hand resting on Rex's head. They're trying to scare you into stopping, Ariel said. Naomi closed the laptop. Then we make them realize I'm not the one who should be scared. Naomi didn't wait for the next blow. That same afternoon, she called Lydia and Harlan to meet her at the small law office 2 blocks from the courthouse, a place with no sign on the door, just the name Wexler etched into frosted glass. Wexler was an old friend of Harlan's from his service days, a quiet, meticulous man who'd built a career representing whistleblowers. He listened without interruption as Naomi laid out the timeline, the documents from Denny, the phone call about Ariel. When she finished, he steepled his fingers. If you want to end this, you don't just go after the department. You go after the people who gave the orders. Chief Grady? Naomi asked. Wexler shook his head. Higher. That night, Lydia released a new segment. It didn't just show the Maple Street stop, the rally setup, or Rex's injury. This time, she put faces and names alongside internal memos highlighting the chain of command all the way to City Hall. The closing shot was a still image of the mayor himself, Everett Mason, leaving a closed-door meeting with the chief 2 days before the rally. The voiceover was Naomi's. They think they can run this town in the dark. We're going to light up every corner. The reaction was immediate and volatile. Supporters flooded social media with hashtag who gave the order. The local paper's editorial board called for Mason's resignation. State legislators began publicly urging the AG to expand the investigation beyond the police department. But the backlash was just as fierce. A smear flyer appeared on windshields across the west side, Naomi's face overlaid with the words, dangerous, unstable, anti-police. Ariel found one stuffed into their mailbox. By Friday, Naomi knew they were past the point of no return. Mason wasn't going to step down quietly, and Grady wasn't going to protect his officers by taking the fall. This isn't about just winning anymore, Naomi told Harlan over coffee. It's about making sure they can't bury this when it's over. Harlan studied her for a long moment. That means you're ready for whatever comes next? Naomi didn't blink. It means I know it's coming. That night, as she checked the locks before bed, Naomi caught sight of Rex at the window, ears pricked, body still. Ariel came up beside him. What's he looking at? She asked. Naomi followed his gaze into the darkness. A single figure stood across the street, just far enough back to stay in shadow. Watching. She reached up and pulled the curtain shut. Time to finish this, she said. The summons came on a Monday morning. Not a polite invitation this time, an official subpoena from the state attorney general's office, compelling Naomi to testify in an open hearing. It was set for Friday. The subject line read simply, Public Inquiry into Millstone Police Department and Municipal Governance. The night before, Naomi barely slept. She sat at the kitchen table, the documents from Denny stacked in front of her, highlighted and tabbed. Ariel sat across from her, scribbling notes from her own perspective, dates, names, small details Naomi might forget under the lights. You don't have to be there, Naomi told her for the 3rd time. Ariel looked up, eyes steady. Yes, I do. Rex too. Rex, lying at Naomi's feet, thumped his tail once as if casting his vote. Friday came cold and bright. The courthouse steps were packed, supporters holding signs, news vans lined up along the curb, cameras already rolling. On the other side of the barricades, a smaller but loud group waved "Support our PD" banners. Naomi walked up the steps between Harlan and Lydia, Ariel and Rex just behind her. She could feel the eyes, some hopeful, some hateful, but she kept her head high. Inside, the hearing room was full. At the long table facing the panel sat Chief Grady, Burke, and Mayor Mason, each flanked by attorneys. Naomi took her seat opposite them, her own lawyer beside her. The lead investigator began. "Ms. Daniels, you've provided documentation suggesting coordinated efforts to target you and your family. Are you prepared to confirm that under oath?" Naomi's voice was steady. "Yes." She laid out the Maple Street stop, the kennel footage, the rally setup memo, the BB gun incident, the phone call about Ariel, and finally, the chain of messages leading back to Mason's office. Every time she spoke a name, a murmur rippled through the room. Halfway through, the investigator held up one of the memos. "This directive, any incident involving the Daniels dog should be treated as a safety risk." "Who authored this?" Naomi didn't answer. She didn't have to. Denny, seated in the second row, stood. "That came from Chief Grady, and he got it from Mason." The room erupted. The investigator's gavel banged, calling for order. For the first time all morning, Mason spoke. "This is a distortion," Naomi cut in. "The only distortion here is how you've twisted power into a weapon against your own people." Hush fell. Cameras zoomed. By the time Naomi stepped back outside into the flash of cameras and the roar of the crowd, she knew two things. They hadn't won yet. But the truth was out. And once the truth is in the light, it's a lot harder to bury. The fallout began before Naomi even made it home. By that evening, the governor's office announced a temporary suspension of Chief Grady, pending a full investigation. The mayor, Everett Mason, refused to resign but was stripped of all direct oversight of the police department. Lydia's phone didn't stop buzzing. Her live stream from the hearing had been clipped, shared, and dissected on every major news channel. The clip of Naomi saying, "The only distortion here is how you've twisted power into a weapon," had already been replayed thousands of times. 2 weeks later, the state AG's office filed formal misconduct charges against Burke and 2 other officers. Burke's mugshot appeared on the same evening news segment that showed Rex running in the park with Ariel, an unspoken contrast between cruelty and innocence. Harlan's veteran group received a grant to expand their advocacy work. They opened a legal aid desk in Millstone's community center, where Naomi sometimes volunteered between meetings with the Oversight Commission. Not everyone in town changed. Some neighbors still crossed the street when Naomi walked by. The "Support our PD" signs didn't vanish overnight. But something had shifted, like a window cracked open after years of stale air. One afternoon, as Naomi and Ariel were leaving the grocery store, a woman she didn't know stopped them in the parking lot. She was older, with deep lines around her eyes. "I was wrong about you," the woman said simply. Then she bent to scratch Rex behind the ears before walking away. In early spring, Naomi took the old camera from Rex's harness, the one that had caught so much of what they'd endured, and set it on a shelf above her desk. Ariel asked, "You're not going to use it anymore?" Naomi smiled faintly. "No, some battles you fight once, others you just keep watch for." On the first warm evening of the year, they went to the park. Ariel tossed a ball, Rex chased it, and Naomi sat on the grass watching them. The town wasn't fixed, the system wasn't clean. But there was movement, small, stubborn, forward. And sometimes, Naomi thought, that's how change starts. Not with one victory, but with the decision to never stop showing up. Months later, Millstone streets had the same cracked sidewalks, the same flickering street lamps. But if you paid attention, you could see what had shifted. The community center bulletin board was crowded with flyers, not just about lost pets and yard sales, but legal aid clinics, tenant rights meetings, and mental health support for veterans. Someone had painted a mural on the brick wall facing Main Street, a soldier in uniform standing beside a teenage girl, with a dog at their feet, looking out over a field at sunrise. No names. No captions. Everyone in town knew who it was. Naomi didn't attend the mural unveiling. She was out by the edge of town that day, standing with Harlan and the veteran group at the dedication of a small memorial garden. It was for those who had served and come home to fight different battles, quiet, invisible ones. When the speeches ended, Naomi stayed behind, hands in her pockets, staring at the engraved stone. Ariel came up beside her. They spelled your name right this time. Ariel teased softly. Naomi smirked. Small victories. Rex nosed between them, tail wagging. Naomi reached down and scratched behind his ears, feeling the rough scar where fur still hadn't grown back. That night, Naomi sat at her desk with the old harness camera in her lap. She didn't turn it on. She didn't need to. The weight of it in her hands was enough a reminder of how fragile truth could be, and how fiercely you had to guard it once you caught it. She set it back on the shelf and opened the window. The air was cool, carrying the distant sound of kids playing under the streetlights. Somewhere, Naomi knew, another fight was starting. Another family was being pushed into a corner. Another kid was being told, without words, that they didn't belong, and maybe, just maybe, someone like her would be there to say, "You do." As the streetlights blinked on, Naomi leaned against the window frame, watching Ariel and Rex walk back from the corner store, silhouettes against the fading sky. It wasn't a perfect town. It wasn't a perfect world. But under the same sky, they were still here, still standing, still ready. What started as one family's fight became a ripple that reached every corner of Millstone. The streets are still cracked. The system is far from clean. But the truth is out there now, and once it's in the light, it's harder to bury, because change doesn't come from one victory. It comes from showing up, again and again, and maybe that's something we can all do. If this story moved you, share it. Keep it alive. And join us here, because the next time someone tries to hide the truth, we'll be right here to bring it back into the light.